Hello and welcome to the world as we see it. So today is Wednesday, the 5th of January, which reminds me it's one of my cousin's birthdays. So I must drop them a message after I finish here. So that's very important. Make a mental note. Welcome to you. If this is your first visit to the transmission, if you're a repeat visitor, then welcome back. Today we've got a bit of a mixed bag in terms of agenda. Wednesday and Thursday is always a little bit like this. Certainly since the Sarum course started. But so on purpose we've left Wednesday and Thursday with a bit of an irregular agenda. But I thought I should share with you a few things. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is an email which I received from Father David, which I thought was very, very interesting. And it's all about the fate of, well, not just old churches which have gone from parishes in the UK, over the recent years, but also the fate which awaits numerous churches over the forthcoming, the next 10 or 5 or 10 years even. I don't think it's even going to be as far as 20 years. And that fate is that they are going to close and those properties are being sold off and converted very often into residential properties, which although I understand the aesthetic, I understand why they are beautiful to live in, and who can blame an investor? Who can blame a person who wants to make a place their own for buying something which is as beautiful as an old church, a converted old church, or even just part of a converted old church, or their associated school buildings, which is something which happened in Faversham. Actually, the old school buildings were the lovely flint buildings were converted into very beautiful, expensive apartments. Now, I'm going to see if I can share this email with you. Oops, that didn't work very well, did it? That always happens. I set it up, doesn't work. So let's let's try again. We'll try again without you seeing the errors I make. We'll see whether this works, and hopefully it will. Now you will also see behind me an increasing number of photographs which were decidedly absent, and I've thought about it, and I thought, these photographs around our house are they're all around the place, and I wonder if that's going to work. It is going to work. Very good. And let's see if what happens there. Right, so there's no way of doing that. There is a way of doing this though. So let me just do that, and do that, and do that, and we'll see whether we can do that. Is that going to work? I think it will work if I do that. Right, what I'm doing is I'm actually spending time just covering over the inbox, because I don't particularly want you guys to see the email addresses of people who have written to me. But at the same time, I do want you to see almost everything else. So I think we'll take it as far as that. Is that going to work? Can we take that up to there? No, that didn't work. We'll take that up to there. We'll take that up to there. Yes, so I think that that will work. Right, and I know we've lost our logo and everything, but I don't think that much matters for now. What we've got here is an email written to me by Father David, as you may or may not be able to see from there. And it says more than 400 churches close in a decade amid shocking threats to parishes. Bedrock of Church of England shows signs of crumbling as analysis by the Telegraph shows nearly 1,000 closed in just over 30 years. 1,000 churches in the UK. It's only a little country, isn't it? So, tiny little country, and 1,000 churches have gone in 30 years. And I find that, I'm trying to find language which is nice. I actually find it gut wrenching. I find it terribly emotive. I feel upset about it. And it's got a beautiful picture here. I don't know where that is, but it says analysis of Church of England data by this newspaper found that 423 churches were closed between 2010 and 2019. The figure signifies the downward trend regarding the number of churches in the country. Further analysis reveals that almost 1,000 have been forced to close in just over 30 years, 940 between 87 and 2019. This means that the total number of churches left stands at around 15,000. It marks the first comprehensive analysis of church numbers because the church's official data contained in its annual reports only cover individual years. Furthermore, the research does not take into account the impact of the pandemic, and as a result, clergy and lay people fear the total figure could be much higher. The Very Reverend Andrew Nunn, Dean of Southwark Cathedral, who's one of the most senior Anglican priests, called the rate of increase in the number of church closures shocking, and quite right he is too, if you want my opinion. I share the concern of many people that the policies that lead to the closure of churches may also mean we will be seeing more and more changes to the parish system, which is, after all, the bedrock of the life of the Church of England for England. Across the Church's 42 dioceses, there are, on average, almost 6% fewer churches, with the total falling from 16,436 in 1987 to 15,496 in 2019. The Church of England defines a church as a building which is licensed as a place of worship within the parish system. This can include former mission halls and less permanent buildings. Now, I do want to say, by the way, I might bring you back here. I might bring you back to my full face, as I call it. So I think this is terribly important, because I understand. I completely understand why economically things might not wash their face. And I understand in Britain, which has a separation between church and state, the government can't step in and do something. I get that. I understand. However, I find it shocking that when you have a building as large as many of these churches are, which is a community resource, I don't understand why local authorities can't take them over, can't be custodians of them, right? You know, there must be, look, if I can imagine it, there must be a way, right? So there must be a legal way that local authorities would be, I say local authorities, it could be voluntary sector agencies for all I know, right? It could be a body that's set up specifically for this, you know, within the village, within the town, within the city, which signs a long-term agreement for a peppercorn rent, £1 a year maybe, to take on the fabric of the church and grounds and, you know, all of its maintenance. Or maybe there's a maintenance agreement, so actually the church continues to have, you know, freehold ownership, and the church has to maintain it. Why not? Because it's a service in the community. It would still be the Church of England providing a service in the community. And I think people then who grow up having used that creche, or grow up having used that nursery, or popped in to go to that community cafe, or learnt how to DJ in the community radio station, or whatever these buildings are then going to be used for, they would associate that good work in their community with the mission of the church, right? You know, helping folk. And I, I, I find it really rather shocking, this notion that you'd sell off the family silver, you'd sell off the fabric of the church for the sake of, you know, a financial problem today. You know, these financial issues, when looked at in the broader, longer history, you know, in context of the church, these financial issues are relatively small beer, right? They are, it's a financial issue. It's not the be all and end all, right? So I do get upset about it, and I'm a member of various gangs on Facebook monitoring the closure of various churches, and more than that, which really irritates me, demolition of churches. Yes, I routinely look at these pages and get get agitated, as you might be able to tell. So anyway, let's carry on reading about this because it's very interesting. So it says the Diocese of Durham had 310 churches in 87, but by 2019 that figure had dropped to 264. Meanwhile, the Diocese of Manchester, so its total number of churches fall from 371 to 316 for the same period. Only 3 dioceses bucked the trend. Canterbury, the diocese overseen by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Justin Welby, who is the most senior member of the Anglican Church, saw the number of churches increase from 325 to 360. Coventry saw, now, I should stop there and just have a comment. I remember working in Canterbury. I was in Canterbury for the best part of 10 years, working with a homeless charity, which has now changed its name and does jolly good work out of a homelessness day centre, which is called Catching Lives, a very worthy cause if ever you need one. And whilst working in that little city, which is what it is, it's very, very small, has a population of something like, an actual population of something like 80,000 people. And then when the students come along, that population shoots up to something like 150,000 people every year. So it's a student town, it's a little city, lovely place. And there were lots of new churches, newly built churches. So I'm not surprised that during that same period, from 87 to 19, that so many new churches were built. And certainly there was a very big United Reformed church with a beautiful dome on top, I think built by Coombs. Anyway, never mind. Let's carry on. Coventry saw its number of churches rise from 240 to 242. And the number of churches in the Diocese of Worcester rose from 271 to 274. The figures come as religious leaders claim that many church buildings are in the wrong locations, as communities have moved away and left the old infrastructure of society stranded. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have to say. Now I'm starting to want to disagree, right? I don't agree. And the reason I don't agree is because of COVID, because of this pandemic, more and more people are choosing to buy houses out of London, out of city centres, where they are able to work at home. The commute, this notion of sitting on a, on a bus, on a train, then on an underground, then maybe on another bus, having to get to work, taking 1, 2, 3 hours to travel to work and then to get home again. This is broken for most jobs. Most jobs in Britain now, except, of course, there are lots of jobs like doctors and nurses and such, but most admin jobs, most desk jobs can be done at home. And I think people understand that now. And they understand that by doing a job at home, they're saving 5 or 6 hours a day instead of sitting there, maybe reading. They can be at home with their families. They can be going for walks. They can be, enjoying the garden. They can be, taking part in the seasons changing. And they've experienced that for more than a year. And so I do think that if the Church of England decides to push ahead with this idea of, throwing the baby out with the bath water, they're making a catastrophic mistake. It's a big error of judgment in my mind. They should hang on to these things by hook and by crook, and they should repurpose them by all means within the community. By all means, do that, but don't sell them off. It's a very, very bad idea. The only other idea I have, the only other time where I'm aware a big institution or institutions sold off their stock is when councils in England sold off council housing. They made it all privately owned. And what happened was, those people who had never been able to buy houses were suddenly able to, jump onto the property ladder. 30, 40 years down the line, what's happened? There is no council housing stock. They're having to rebuild, right? Because there are still poor families who can't rent, who can't afford to buy, and they need assistance. And so councils, having sold this massive, huge amount of stock, are now faced with the prospect of having to rebuild their stocks. Many of them are entering into partnerships with, various housing associations and various other quangos. But some of them are building stock in their own names, and they're having to do it when they were forced in the 80s to sell them off. So it has the same smell about it to me as when council housing was sold off and effectively given away. Bad idea. So let's read it. It says, last month, figures from the Office of for National Statistics revealed that the number of Christians in England is close to falling below 50% for the first time. I think we read about this a while ago in the Church Times, right? It said, as atheists now account for more than a third of faith groups in an increasingly secular society. Okay, I'm not going to argue with that. Yes, that's the case. We can't deny that. That's probably got a lot to do with education, right? I think there is a direct link between education and people questioning their faith, right? I think as people learn more, there are more questions, inevitably. Now, many of those people who learn more and then question more determine that actually Christianity and any other faith they might have had when they grew up is the right thing for them. Meanwhile, for others, it's not. So yes, this trend is happening. It's a bad thing. But it's just a reality. It is where we are. The Dean of Southwark Cathedral said that this issue is not as simple as saying churches have closed, so the church is dying. Thank you. It's not that simple. Just because somebody is atheist, or just because someone professes to be an atheist, actually, when it comes to things like weddings, christenings, funerals, very often they will still go to church. They'll profess they don't believe, but they still go, right? So there are these rituals within our faith, within our society, where actually this idea of a secular society, it's a secular society built on Christian principles. That's it, right? And because of that, because of the importance of the Christian calendar, because of the importance of, Christian, our rich Christian history, uh, actually, although a person might say, I'm an atheist, it doesn't mean that they don't find certain aspects of the ritual or the calendar, within the liturgy, still quite beautiful. They might not agree in principle, but they will. I don't think that means that they will destroy it. They're not anarchists. They just don't happen to agree, right? And that's, in my book, that's okay, right? We need, there are lots of different folks around the world, and we need to make room for everyone. There is a lot the church could be doing for those people, the more than 50% or just below 50% of society in the UK who say that they are Christian, but they don't go to church. We need to look at the reasons why not, right? We need to do more for that group. They, if this were politics, they would be the swing voters. They say one thing and they do another. Why? Let's get to the root of it. Take the northern industrial cities, for instance, where there was a church and a pub or three in every community. Often, the pubs and the church have closed for similar reasons. Communities have moved away and left the old infrastructure of society stranded. I'm sorry, don't agree on this. I think that one of the major issues to do with pubs closing is there's two major things. Number one, because I think one of the kind of the death knells which occurred was when the smoking ban came along. Smoking ban occurred, and suddenly people were not allowed to smoke while they were drinking. They had to go out in the cold garden. Well, if you're going to hang out in the garden or out on the pavement in the front of a pub for the majority of the evening while you have a chat with your mates and have a drink, you might as well be standing on your own patio, right? And so I think that was the first thing. I think the second thing is supermarkets. Supermarkets selling much cheaper alcohol than pubs, right? So a person could not only stand in their own back garden and be very cold smoking, but they could also take outside, a beer or whatever, a glass of wine, and it would be substantially cheaper than if they bought it in the pub. The third reason why I think is because of streaming services, Wi-Fi and Netflix and things like that. Staying home and having, relatively cheap, very large smart TVs, right, actually enables friends and family to gather together, to socialize together, to drink alcohol together, and they can still smoke in the garden. And they haven't spent anywhere near as much as if they went to the cinema or went to the pub. So, friends and family are doing that more and more. They're having nights in, they're having meals in, more and more. Certainly that's a trend which I'm hearing from my friends and my family. The prospect of going to the pub and spending 50 quid or more is anathema to them. They would rather not, thank you very much. So that's what was going on with the pub. The other thing, I suppose, as well, there was a campaign for real ale. I don't know if you remember this camera thing. And that was because pubs had become just homogenized. You went from one pub to another, and I'm not picking on any brand in particular, certainly not mentioning Wetherspoons. And, it didn't matter whether you were going to a pub in Catford or Ramsgate or Canterbury, or Wetherspoons were the Wetherspoons were the Wetherspoons. It was a bit like McDonald's, and the soul, they were soulless. They're soulless places. They're not like the old Red Lion of Badlesmere, right? They're not like, in some of these places, some of these different pubs in different communities, they might be known because they have a good quiz on a Wednesday, or they have a a good cover band, or they have a shuffleboard, or they have bat and trap, or they have skittles. And as those pubs were being pushed out of business by the giants such as Weatherspoons, which again offered cheap beer, really, I think that if you combine all of those factors together, that's why pubs were closing. That's not why people weren't going to church. It's unrelated in my mind. Okay, so let's have a read. It says, the church faces a crisis regarding safeguarding the future of the institution amid dwindling church and congregation numbers, which have been further damaged by the pandemic. The Archbishop of York, the Most Reverend Stephen Cottrell, is responsible for vision and strategy. His blueprint for the church's future over the next decade, which aims for it to be simpler, humbler, bolder. And he's talking about having, creating 10,000 home churches where people are able to attend, a service in a neighbour's house just up the road. So, and I can sympathise with this idea. We've had this conversation before, I know. I can sympathise with this idea where, because, and this is the argument against closing churches, because churches are closed, your local church is closed, you've got to go to the big church on the other side of town. Maybe you're a single mum, maybe you've got 1, 2, or 3 children, you've got to go by bus. The prospect of being able to, partake in communion in a house on the same street is obviously far more attractive than dragging your 3 kids on the bus to a church halfway across town. So I see that, I can empathise with it. But actually, why close and sell off these churches? It doesn't make sense. It says, last year, the Telegraph revealed that multiple clergy and lay people had voiced fears over the collapse of the Church of England in rural communities. Months later, a leaked church document suggested that the pandemic has provided an opportunity for radical change within the church, which could result in the loss of the parish church model in a bid to remain financially stable. And I think this is honestly ridiculous. As I say, look, there's a picture. That's a picture of a lovely sitting room, with a beautiful, what probably was an even more beautiful stained glass window, which they've ripped out. How they could have destroyed a stained glass window. I mean, I personally, if I was in that apartment, I would much rather they had kept the stained glass, and they could have put secondary glazing. They could have put 2 lots of secondary glazing in. They didn't need to remove the stained glass. Terrible. Tragedy, in my mind. Tragedy. Anyway, it says, the former St. Lawrence Church in Allington in Kent, my stomping ground, dating back to before 1132, was turned into residential accommodation in 1983. The reports sent to the 42 diocesan secretaries warned clergy to prepare for changes and cuts as officials prepare to overhaul the system, sparking fears that churches in rural towns and parishes will not survive. Travesty. Travesty. A spokesperson for the Church of England said, while there is always sadness when a church closes, the number of churches closing has fallen steadily. Between 2010 and 2019, there were 209 church closures across the Church of England's 12,300 parishes, the lowest number for any decade in the last half century. So the rate of closure is slowing. That's good news. It is a real tribute to the dedication of parish clergy and volunteers that we are able to maintain our commitment to being a Christian presence in every community. The parish system is the heart of the Church of England, and the challenge now is to equip our parishes to serve their communities and reach out to the people of England with the good news of Jesus Christ, which is needed now more than ever. Well, no one in this place is going to disagree with that at all. But I do fear that this voice of appeasement is insufficient. Okay, that's what I think. I think it's very worrying, very startling indeed. Whew. Got me quite agitated, that did. Got me very agitated. Now, what we are going to do now is have a little bit, what have I said, the Old Church's Sarum update. So let's have a look at Sarum College, what we are doing this week. I'll tell you a little bit. In this unit, we'll be developing a theme of vocation and discernment. We will be addressing a number of different issues, such as who has a vocation, every Christian or some Christians? Which is primary, my vocation or our vocation? Does God have a blueprint for your calling? We will be suggesting that vocation is never purely my vocation, and identifying the need for ongoing discernment of potential new directions of calling. Well, I think that makes sense anyway. Of course, imagine if, for example, here I am in Pattaya in Thailand, and we have identified in our appeal the need for medical equipment for those foreigners over here, mostly foreigners over here, who don't have insurance, don't have access to equipment. They have to buy it new every time. Well, we've had some limited success in providing an an oxygen condenser to 2 terminally ill patients who in the parish who needed oxygen and who were unable to afford going into hospital. So for 2 people at least so far, we have helped them. Now, it may well be that ministry in the future changes. It may well be that there's a new need. In the past, the parish has supported people with HIV. I think children with HIV specifically. Currently, that and up until now, the parish has supported refugees in the parish. These days, it's geriatric care and kind of hospice care, if you like. That's what I have identified, and having chatted to Father David and to other members of the congregation, we've agreed, this is something we know people will benefit from, and the more we get known for that, the more people will benefit from that. So, but nothing's written in stone. It may well be that in time, whether it's next year or the year after or 10 years down the line, that ministry may well change. So, of course, this notion of personal vocation needs to be adaptable, doesn't it? Well, one needs to be quite light-footed and able to adapt. So that's what we are looking at with Sarum College this week. So it's a good week. I've got about a bit more than a month until my 2 assignments need to be handed in, and so I will be reporting on their progress. I haven't really, I'll be honest with you, I haven't made a huge amount of progress with those 2 assignments because I've been focusing on applying for different jobs. Well, now the job seeking is going to have to go on the back burner for a couple of weeks while I focus on those 2 assignments. That's it. Managing time as best we can. That's what I need to do. Now, what I wanted to do was to share with you something which is excellent news. And what I'm going to share with you is this picture. I'm moving on to the next item on our semi-informal agenda. And this is a photograph, as you can see. It's a bag of books. A bag of books. Now, I know most people might not get jolly excited by a bag of books. Believe it or not, I really do. When there is a bag of books, I get very, very, very excited. And this bag of books, by the way, is a special bag of books. And the reason why is because on Facebook, as very often as you probably know by now, I am invariably engaged between my Chinese classes. I saw a post by somebody called Jonathan Clark, who is the former Bishop of Croydon. Okay, so I'm sure it's Jonathan Clark. I don't want to say it is Jonathan Clark, but I'm pretty sure it's Jonathan Clark. And he wrote, and I could easily just do a Google search and say who's the former Bishop of Croydon. I think it's Jonathan Clark. He wrote on Facebook, he lots of photograph of some books, and he said, look, if anyone has need of these books, then get in touch, and you're very welcome to them. And I thought that's great. Now I got in touch with him, and as I got in touch with him and said, look, I'm only just starting out on my road to. I'm not sure what books you've got. I should want, right? And instead of me go through your shelves and say, oh, I like that book and I'd like that book, maybe what you could do is tell me what books you think would be useful for me living here in Thailand. It's a small congregation, and it would be useful if you could tell me what would be useful. I want practical books which I can use. And so he said yes, and he put these books aside. So I thought, well, here I am in Thailand. How am I going to get these books which are in Croydon? How am I going to get them, picked up and put somewhere safe? Well, I spoke to my good old friend Luke, who agreed to drive all the way down to Croydon from Hammersmith, where he lives. So it's not a small, it's not a small drive. It's an inconvenient drive, and he picked them up from Jonathan, and he then proceeded to drive them all the way to Whitstable in Kent, which is probably another 70 or 80 miles, I think, in a not very straight line, and dropped them off at my dad's old house, my stepmother, with my stepmother, who has picked them up on the doorstep only the other day, 2 days ago. And so I really am indebted to Luke. And it is Jonathan Clark, by the way. Jonathan Clark, the former Bishop of Croydon, has given me these books. Now, I haven't been through the bag, right? I've only just received on WhatsApp this photograph, so I don't really know what's in the bag. All right, but we will go through the bag, and then some of those books, I don't think all of them will necessarily justify being sent by airmail or whatever to me right now, but there will be some of them which will be very, very useful immediately. So I think that will be that's excellent. Very, very happy I am, and really, well, that's a Christmas present, isn't it? That is the Christmas present, which a bit of a bonus Christmas present at that. I've been so waiting for this, and I think the offer of the book came in sort of September, but it's taken some time for Luke to be able to take time off work and do all of that driving. So thank you, Luke. Very, very decent of you, old chum. Very grateful I am too. Now, that marks the end of our transmission today. Really, what we are going to do before we go is say a couple of prayers, as we always do, as we always make sure we end on a prayer, and as always, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer, followed by the collect for the day, which we have got from the Church of England Facebook page. So I always say this to everyone: if you would rather not pray, then you don't have to. You know, no one's at home with you forcing you to pray. All we're saying is, if you'd like to join in, you're jolly welcome. But if you'd rather not, you don't have to. But stick around anyway, because it's rather nice, and it might give you a chance to be mindful. Okay. Anyway, let's then move on, and let us pray with confidence to the Father, as our Saviour has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, in the birth of your Son, you have poured on us the new light of your incarnate word, and shown us the fullness of your love. Help us to walk in his light and dwell in his love, that we may know the fullness of his joy, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Now, thank you very much for joining me today on this step along the journey on the road to ordination. I hope it's been a little bit engaging for you. We've had no comments as usual from Facebook or Twitch, which is a little bit disappointing. I do wish that sometimes there was a bit more engagement, but never mind. You know, this is life. In any event, yes, if I have said something which strikes a chord with you, which resonates with you, I hope you do get in touch. Okay, you can get in touch either at the Facebook page or through the church website. So you're very, very welcome to do that. I would encourage you to do that. Now, without further ado, I will say, with prayers and best wishes, bye-bye for now.